Hello, hello, hello. How are you doing today? This is Dr. Julie Allig of JLA Analytics coming at you from lovely Manchester, New Hampshire in the United States. You all, how about I'd love to know where you are joining us from. Drop that in the comments here so we can see who's joining us and where you are today. And maybe where you're joining us from is having better weather than New Hampshire is right now, because I'll tell you, it is gray and rainy outside. So not too happy. But how are you all doing? It's good to see you. And today we're going to talk about a little challenge that I set for myself this week. So the challenge was based on one that I've seen a few other data professionals, data organizations do, where they take one data set and what they do is they make as many charts and graphs as they possibly can out of it. And so the challenge is usually called one data set, 100 charts or 100 graphs or something. So I did that for myself this week. So I wanted to let you guys know how I fared and talk a little bit about just, the way that depending on the story we want to be telling with the data we've got, how choosing one chart type over another is either helpful to get our point across to the audience, or it can hinder that. All right, so I am going to put up, if you have a question as I start going through this, just go ahead and drop it in the comments and I will answer it as soon as I can. Otherwise, let's take a look at what I came up with. And spoiler alert, I did not make it to 100 separate charts. I made it really far, but not quite 100. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you will have read this week's that I sent out earlier this morning, talking about how I had quite a few kind of bang my head against the table moments trying to get some of these charts and graphs to work. It's like I can see it in my head, and why won't Excel or Tableau or Power BI, why won't they draw it the way that I have in my head? Can't they see it? So, all right. So let's jump over to, all right. I put together some slides and I will go ahead and put this in slideshow. So the interesting thing is that I wanted to do here is I wanted to use a very, very, very small data set, because a lot of times, I would say just about every time that I talk to any of my clients or any of my students or even any of my colleagues about analyzing their data, it comes up, we don't have enough data. It's not even worth it. Or we don't have enough data to be statistically significant, so we're not going to go down that road because we won't get anything useful out of it. I will address that in another live stream coming up in a couple of weeks. But for this, I wanted to take something as small as possible just to be able to show that you don't need a lot of data points to really start looking at what kind of story is being told and to actually have a story that's worth being told. So what I did is I went out to the data source. You can see it down here, Our World in Data. they have a page where they have collected a lot of information about artificial intelligence, that is AI. And I love Our World in Data. They're out of Oxford University over in England. And they've got really good data sets over there. And they've also got a really stellar group of people on their team that are visualizing, analyzing, and writing about and interpreting the data and what it means. And if you are at all interested, follow Hannah Ritchie, Ritchie. She's one of their lead data analysts there, data visualization. And she is just awesome. So, what I did, they had a lot of different pieces of data. I took just one, the number of newly founded AI companies between 2013 and 2022. So the way that they broke down the world, they categorized it into China, the EU and the UK, the US, and then they just had world. Okay. So what I did for a lot of these, you're going to see is I even abbreviated this more, and I didn't look at world. I looked at just these three categories. Again, I'm trying to get as small as I possibly can to make the point that you don't need a ton of data to really see some interesting things going on. So these are the number of AI companies in 27 in China in 2013. So for example, 27. By 2022, they had 1,337. Now that's a total, that's a sum of all those intervening years too. So that's like the sum of newly founded AI companies. And so we've also got it for the EU and the UK and for the US. Okay, so the table is nice. The table is just fine to present the data. Let's see a couple of ways that we can be graphing this so that we start to see like what's actually going on here. Because just from here, we can see that in each case of these three categories, it's definitely grown. It's increased by a lot, right? A whole lot, each of them. Apart from that, we can't really say a whole lot. So let's go ahead and jump into just a couple of the 100 ways that we could graph this. So the first way, and this one I did in Microsoft Excel, the first way is to use a stacked column chart. So this you've probably seen before. And these are nice when what we want to do is just show the overall total and then the proportion of each of the subgroups that makes up that total. So what's the story that we see here, right, as the audience to this? The story is, look at this tremendous growth from 2013 up to 2022, right? If I wanted to be even more informative, if I wanted to do something like that, I could include somewhere here the percentage increase. Like it increased X percent between 2013 and 2022. Could do that. Depending on your audience, it might clutter your graph a little bit, and it might not be germane to what you want to talk about. Because the other thing that this does is it gives us the overall, but it also gives us the subgroup breakdowns. And now over here at 2013, what do you notice? So we've got the gray, which is the US, and we've got the orange, which is the EU and the UK. I don't see any China. There is China in there, and we did see that, remember, on the table in the previous one, there were 27, but it was so small, we can't see it here. So now that's an interesting part of the story too, right? Move over to here, and we're able to see not only has it grown a lot, but just how much of it is attributed to the United States, how much to the EU and the UK, and how much to China. Now, so the story coming out of here is one about growth, one about a general overview, one about you could say each region, right, and its individual growth. The one thing that you have to be careful about with stacked column charts or stacked bar charts, depending on what you call them, you got to be careful because it's hard for us as humans to figure out, especially when you start getting more than 2 or 3 here, trying to figure out the proportions, right? Between this and this in the gray, between this orange and that orange. And then it can also be difficult when you have more than like 3 to figure out, okay, is this orange even bigger than the blue? You can kind of see that it is, but in order to double check, you might go and try to say, okay, this is more or less 3,100. This is more or less 1,500. And then this is more or less 1,500. So 1,500, 1,600, and that's quite a cognitive load, right? So if the story you're trying to tell is something about the growth of the EU and UK relative to China, this might not be the best, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. But you can already see what kind of stories we can start telling just from this stacked column chart. Okay, next one. Here's another stacked column chart. And this one, 3D. I did this in Excel. It's one of those standard templates that Excel will spit out for us. I do not like 3D, and I try to never use 3D charts and graphs. It's especially when you get more than 2, it's very difficult to try and figure out, okay, where exactly is this back? Where exactly is this front? What level over here on our y-axis? It just gets really difficult for the eye to actually perceive with any kind of accuracy. But it's one that's out there. And so if you were going to use it, I mean, the 3-dimensional aspect of it definitely makes it, you feel like you can reach out and touch it, right? Like it's a solid block. It reminds me of like Legos, right? My kids are older now. They still play with Legos a lot. So this reminds me of Legos and stacking those, something very tactile, right? So again, if what you're trying to communicate is the overall like volume of these new companies, new AI companies, this might not be a bad way to do that if you really want to hit home for your audience with that. But again, not endorsing the 3D, just so we're clear. A lollipop chart. Now, last week when I was talking about graphs, I talked about Sankey diagrams, and those are ones that you don't see very often. And they're really, really helpful when the story that you're trying to tell is one about movement, one about changes from one state to another state. We talked about like students in a university setting, changing their major from one to another, and we can see that flow. Lollipop charts, they don't have anything to do with Sankey diagrams, but lollipop charts are ones that they're also, you don't see them very often, but they're also really good when the story we're trying to tell is one of like growth, right? And comparison. Now, I did this one also in Excel, and the head banging, part of the head banging this week that I referenced in my weekly newsletter was because you see these over here along the bottom. For whatever reason, I could not figure out how to get, this is China, this is the EU and the UK, and this is the United States. For the life of me, I could not figure out how to make Excel not put these numbers down here, but instead put those value labels. So if anyone has any quick and dirty, solutions to that, please add them in the comments below. I will be forever grateful. But that said, now that we know that this is China, this is the EU and UK, and this is the US, what's really nice about this lollipop chart is we've got the 2013, and then we've got the 2022 value. So again, we're using a straight line and we're simply plotting against each other, and we can see the starting points pretty much, right, in 2013, and then the ending points in 2022. So again, we've got that length. Here it's a vertical length again. We've got that length that says something about the actual number. And we're also able to see and perceive very easily with our eyes and with our brain just what kind of growth there was for each of these regions simply by looking at the length of those lines. So if you've heard me talk before about the three basic kinds of like charts and graphs, that if you're going to do anything, use them. And those are the scatter plot, the line graph, and the bar chart. Well, one of the reasons why those are like the three that you always want to have in your back pocket as a starting place is because those are the ones that the eye is able to perceive well enough, because they're composed of one of the sub elements that they're composed of is a line, a straight line. And the human eye, the human brain really understands and perceives length very, very accurately. So here we're drawing on that. We're also, notice I'm using a colorblind friendly palette here. And yeah, we've got a couple of different elements in here that are really helpful. We also could have, instead of doing 13 to 22 on one line, we could have graphed out 13 on its own line and then 22 on its own line. And so again, we would have seen the length, and we would have had a direct comparison there, a comparison with oneself, right, with each region. Don't see a lot of lollipop charts, and they're pretty easy to do. I did this in Excel, but I kind of hacked it. What I did was I created a line plot, and then I added in these lines here, because you can't do it it's not a like a template or anything you can do. In R, in Python, in others, you can just tell the program to create a lollipop chart and it'll do it for you. But in Excel, you can't, but you can hack it. So this is a nice way. Again, so what's the story that we're able to get here? The story is all of them are growing, but look at this one, which we know is the US. Look at this one out here. So much more, much very far ahead of the pack. There you go. The other kind that I really like to use, and the people that I show to tree maps to really seem to like it, is a tree map. And so what I did here, I did this in Tableau. And what I did here is if the whole of this is 100%, then for 2013, this is the share, that's the United States, which is about 59%. This is the share, that's the EU and UK, and this is the share that's China. So again, this is more not so much telling the story of, wow, how many companies, AI companies have been founded, right? What's the volume? What's the percent increase since 2013 or anything like that? This is more focused on, okay, of all those that have been founded in the past decade, what share does each of these regions of the world make up of it? So that's really where we're focusing here. Do you see that subtle difference there? Because here all we know is that there is a whole, there is a total, and it is 100%. We don't know exactly what that total is, like we do in the other graphs. But here we're able to point out to our audience just in 2013 at least, just what the lion's share of a lion's share the United States had, right? Compared to the EU and then China down here with the smallest. And then if we map it to 2022, looks the same in terms of especially what one's the largest, the second, and the third, right? But the proportions have shifted. And it's a little hard to tell just by looking at each one individually. So I went ahead and I put these together for you. So you can see right here that this dark blue rectangle is bigger than this square. And I do have those percentages. I think I forgot. They're in the tooltip in Tableau. I did not put them in here. So my apologies. I can't tell you exactly what they are, but I know this is less over here in 2022 for the US. This is less than 59%. But look here, each one, it's interesting. It's the same order, right? Because that's how you read tree maps. You start here at the left and then top to bottom. So left, top to bottom. So the same order, but look how the shares have changed. So that's really interesting. So that's the sort of thing that, we could have just done this if we were writing a paper, like a white paper, or we were writing an executive summary and we wanted to include one chart or something. Maybe it was a day we were sick of making stacked bar charts or something, and we said, let's just throw in a tree map that looks nicer. It's more interesting. It'll catch their attention. Without really thinking, okay, what are we trying to get across in this white paper, in this executive summary? Because if what we're trying to get across is the total number of companies, of AI companies that have been founded in the past decade, this is not the right chart to do that, right? This is the chart to say, the US market has diminished a little bit, and the EU, UK, and the China markets have grown in the past decade. And so for our company, given our goals, we want to focus on whatever. Maybe you're making a play for East Asia. We think that it is a good idea to make a play in China because we've seen them grow over the past decade. You get the idea. All right. So that's what I had to show you today. I didn't want to, wow, we're almost at 3:30. I didn't want to show you every single one that I created. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take that off. There we go. Yeah, I didn't want to show you every single one because honestly, I don't think you need to see every single one. I think you just need to see a couple of examples of the fact that you really can tell some really interesting stories. And remember, we had 6 data points here. That's all we had. And there's a lot more that I was able to make and that I'm going to challenge you to make. I'd love to see if you all would take up this challenge, one data set, 100 graphs. See what you can come up with. I'm going to keep playing with this because this is a lot of fun. This is the sort of thing I really like. But I'd like to see what you come up with also. And it's important because we want to make sure we're communicating, and not just communicating, but communicating the main topic of whatever our data is telling us, and tying that into our business's individual goals and strategies. So I hope you enjoyed this. Next week, we are going to be talking about, I'll go ahead and share my screen again one more time. We're going to talk about algorithmic bias. What the heck is algorithmic bias, you might say? Well, it's the fact that all of these machine learning, AI, all of these equations and all are based on data sets. Those data sets have been taken from lots of places, all across the web, all across government institutions, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, though, they've been treated as if they were unbiased, and that's simply not the case. And I want to talk through a little bit what exactly that means next week, and what you can do about it, how you can start to pull out some of that bias that's inherent in some of these algorithms, right? That you might not even realize you're using. You might not know. And unfortunately, me too, could be, however innocently, we could be continuing that bias simply by using data sets that have that bias baked in, and we just go ahead, use them, and present them as if they were objective. To that point, I was looking on the ProPublica website a couple of weeks ago, and they did a series of stories on algorithmic bias. Now, one of them had this slide in it. It was about the city of Rotterdam over in the Netherlands that had hired Accenture, one of the big consulting firms, to come in and help them figure out a problem they were facing. Basically, you can see this. They wanted to more accurately identify illegitimate welfare recipients. And so what they're saying is what Accenture said in selling itself and its services in this whole project was, by putting together our advanced analytics and machine learning using your data sets, City of Rotterdam, we're going to come out with unbiased citizen outcomes. Spoiler alert, it was very biased. And we'll talk a little bit about that case, and like I said, what we can do about it next week. I don't think any of us go into trying to answer our clients' questions, our businesses' questions, trying to be biased in the analysis we do. Unfortunately, it's just baked in, like I said a couple minutes ago, and there are ways that we can flag it and work around that to be much less biased. I don't think we're completely unbiased, but at least we can get less biased. So that's what I want to talk about next week. If you have any thoughts about that, I would love to hear them. If you take me up on my challenge and think about these one data set, 100 graphs, let me know. Let me know what you come up with. Or I'd love to hear also, you make me feel so much better if you come up with a head banging moment and not in the hair rock kind of way, head banging. Like, why won't it do what I'm telling it to do? I'd love to hear it. Follow me over on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. Um, I'm also over on YouTube. If you're watching me over there, hello. It's nice to see you over there. Click that button and subscribe to the channel so you are always notified when I'm going to be going live or when I have some new videos that are uploaded. Otherwise, you will find me here again next Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And until then, go forth and analyze.